Welcome to Boulder Builders podcast. Today, I'm so glad to have my friend Max Ferguson to come to my studio to make this recording happen. How are you, Max, today?
I'm doing well, Justin. Thank you.
Yeah, so glad you're having a show this morning, today at Boulder, and happen, come to my studio. So I met Max at Better Life Tribe and through Brendan Turner's group. That was a very beneficial group. It's been having a lot of amazing conversations with you in the group as an accountability group. So learn a lot from Max as well. So Max is a real estate broker in Colorado Springs. He's been working there for a few years, right? Before that, you were a real estate acquisition analyst.
Yeah.
Before that,
Yep.
you even majored in land use economics, right? In college. So share with us, your story. Who is Max Ferguson? Where you grew up? How you make it to the real estate world today.
Yeah. So I grew up and Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska. My dad owned a couple, 5 single-family houses, an apartment complex, and then he had a commercial small strip mall until I was about 10 or so. That burned down, but essentially grew up around the whole landlord-tenant situation, I guess, and seeing my dad work, 5-10 hours a month. He's basically fully retired by the 45-ish when he had me. It was pretty late, but seeing that, I went to college, didn't know what to circle for my degree, said, I think I know the most about real estate, and I circled that. 4 years later, graduated, and it's great degree. Did a couple appraisal classes, which have probably helped save my clients quite a bit of money. But the spark after that was getting into commercial real estate for apartments. I was at a small firm, I think 11,000 units. I don't know if that's small or big in the space, but it was in Omaha, Nebraska, where I graduated from college. Spent a little time doing acquisition analysis and tried to learn as much as I could from my boss there. He was great. They poached him from Goldman Sachs. So everything he said was just absolutely true. Everything that he guessed about the future was true, even 5 years, 4, 3.5, whatever after. So I tried to stay there as long as I could, but the situation was tough. Long commute. My wife had already moved out to Colorado for a bit, and so decided to try my hand out here. Moved to Colorado Springs, bought a duplex, still living in the same duplex because we were one of the last 3.5% interest rates. And then I've been looking for a deal ever since, but mainly just working on my main business, which is realtor work, buying and selling homes for people, mainly investment centric, like the person I showed today. Duplex for a single dad in November of last year, but he's looking now up here in Boulder at a flip with his girlfriend. And so that's a lot of fun. And he knows the power of real estate, which is really cool. And I just superbly appreciate those clients that understand the power of what it can do for you, and that you expand your time horizon in real estate. Are generally no mistakes to be made. Obviously, there are very small percentages of situations that don't work out, but for the most part, it's a way that you can slowly become wealthy 99.999% of the time.
Oh man, so you drove like almost 2 hours, right? 2 hours from Springs to Boulder today.
Yeah.
To have the showing.
Hour and a half. And so in these situations, you generally, referring is not the worst idea. I have a partner agent up here that I would generally send my Boulder stuff to. She's amazing. She wrote 30-Day Stay, if you know Ziana. But for this particular client, especially for what they want to do, which is a full flip, and I know my way around construction pretty well. My managing broker now, Solid Rock Realty, he is a licensed contractor. So he's teaching me a ton of stuff. But for this one, normally refer it out. But since it is pretty much a full gut job in some of the scenarios that we're looking at, figured I'd come up here, establish a relationship. I haven't met his girlfriend yet. She's fantastic, and at least guide them. Depends on what they want to do, but it's not viable to show houses 2 hours away every week. But we might buy a place in West Denver here shortly, so I can kind of bridge the gap and start selling a lot more north properties.
So, so I remember, many conversations we had while in the accountability group, and, while I was considering different options, to make more investment after the Kansas triplex, you give me really valuable advice. Still to today, I really appreciate that. that could have saved me, a lot of money. That wouldn't be a wise investment. So, you to me, coming to real estate, investing into real estate is like what I know about real estate is like the single one industry that generate more billionaires or more millionaires than any other industry combined. To me, that provide housing and that's profitable. To me, that's a really great industry to be in. So that the reason for you as well to be in this industry?
Yeah, and I suffer the same entrepreneurial shiny object syndrome that most people do, but real estate has been the one constant in my life since birth of it's always been around. I know the most about it. And if it was a different scenario, if my parents sold insurance and they only ever did insurance, and I'd probably be selling insurance right now. I'm just lucky that it is in real estate. Now, I would have had more chances to become extremely wealthy, I guess, in a different sphere, timeline wise. But it's one of those things where it hurts often because I lose deals. I never thought that I'd be saying, I lost $100,000 deal last week and I still feel broke. Years ago, I'd be proud of myself for even having lost a deal that size. But it's one of those things where we're on the cusp of doing what we want to do financially. Not quite there yet, but it's a much more repeatable and easy thing with real estate.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to make money in the hyper appreciation cycle we saw up until 2022. And I've had to sit for 2.5 years ready with the knowledge of a good rental looks like this, a good flip looks like this. But in that time frame, the amount of people that shouldn't be in the space has dropped dramatically. I think it's one of those where I probably could have gone bankrupt or made $1 million a couple other times in different industries. But my wife obviously is very grateful that I just stuck with this more stabilized income,
Yeah.
And then after you buy that first good property, 5 years later, generally, if you buy really well, you can live for free in say a half of a duplex, or it's at least paying for itself and giving you 1,000 or 2,000 over in cash flow. And there's always bad deals, but on the average of 7 years for the cycle, you're not going to really lose money if you can at least hold a property for 7 years. It's like a bankruptcy. It's just a 7-year timeout.
Yeah.
You got to take more risks.
If you look at like a scale, say like 20, 30 years, holding 20, 30 years, if you paid, $50,000 more or less, it doesn't, affect the whole return so much, the overall, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like what we believe, real estate is not a get rich quick thing, but I mean, it's definitely accumulate wealth and generate wealth for even generations. Yeah. Cool. So I when we had conversations, I recognized that you're a person that you're always learning new things. You're learning. You're passionate about real estate. You're passionate about what you're doing. So I think that really benefit your clients a lot, right? Give us some examples of those stories.
I've always been like this in every business, but I had a frame shift so much, I guess, a couple years ago. I had been in the business selling real estate for about 2 years. I'm 4 years in now of having my license. And the first year, things were just selling extremely easily. Second year, slowed down. Third year, super slow still, picking back up finally. It's one of those things where even if I'm hurting, which has happened a lot recently if I would have closed this deal, I could have bought this investment property that I was looking at in Omaha, or I could have spent more and maybe got a couple people together and gotten that 34 unit that would have absolutely ruined my life, of course, because it just looks fun in theory, but it's a super old apartment building. But I changed my focus from like, how much money can I make to how much money can I make my clients? And ever since then, I think the metric has changed. I haven't run it, but my last 5 buys in 2024 was 40,000 off of list price for properties in the Colorado Springs area. We had some folks, like another great story. Some of my favorite clients, Chad and Carly Andrade, I probably butchered their last name, but they couldn't quite afford a duplex at the time. So we got really creative with it, found them in R2 or residential 2. Essentially 2 units are allowed on the zoning. And they were able to find a property in which had a walkout basement. They cut it in half with what's called an AFS, or accessory family structure, and they are getting almost 1% in rent, which is almost unheard of rent to price ratio in the Colorado Springs area.
Yeah.
And so that's one of those really, really fun stories where, they paid $430,000 for a similarly rentable duplex, it would have been, say, 575, 600. And it's not a true duplex. They share mechanicals and stuff, but they were able to extract, 4,100 a month or something by renting top and bottom. And they paid $430 for the place, almost the 1% rule. And I believe they might pay for utilities to ease that. So it's a little bit less, but that's a great story. I just love that they went out of their way. They put in 10 more grand after to put a beautiful kitchen in the basement. And now I can't remember what their mortgage is at, but I believe they're cash flowing 500 to 1,000 a month by just buying appropriately, 12,000 extra dollars a year to hold a property, and minus maintenance, vacancy, XYZ, it's going to be less than that. I'd say right at really lean, say 6 grand a year, but they also have an asset that's paying for itself. They get to depreciate it off of their taxes, lower their income taxes every year. They also have a nice property in Colorado Springs on the west side that's going to appreciate fairly heavily. Another really good story would be, I got a veteran, 376 days ago. We closed on a quadplex for him, and he hit the very bottom of the interest rates, which was fantastic. He got I think it was a flat 6% for the time. And he's living in one unit, renting out the other 3. The other 3 basically break even on the mortgage. And he did put 10% down, which it depends on where you're at. VA, you can do 0%. This property had most major maintenance done. It wasn't going to need too much, and he wanted to bring down his each month as opposed to holding the 70 grand. Whether that's worth it, Excel spreadsheet. But for him, he was paying a ridiculous amount for 1 bedroom. And so we got him into a 2-bedroom unit, and he manages the complex. It's still a job, or at least a bit of a job extra. But instead of paying $2,100, which is exorbitant for an apartment, it was a nicer apartment, but he is essentially living for free minus, utilities or whatever, but those cancel out. His tenants pay the rest of his mortgage. And so what we figured out, he might be paying $200 a month and then another $500 a month-ish for maintenance, a little bit more for vacancy. I'd have to pull up the spreadsheet again. But essentially, with a very lean underwriting of 3% appreciation, which we've seen stagnation for a couple years, it might not even be fair to do 3%. But over the course of 10 years, 3% or 30 years isn't the most out of the world thing. And so if he held for 10 years and we weren't in the worst market ever when he sold or sells, he'll either make or save $30,000 to $70,000 a year. And that's just the first year. That's going to grow exponentially over however year hold. And so the way that I like to think about it is, he is, not paying $24,000 a year in rent. He is writing off X amount for his income taxes from depreciation of the asset. And then he's also incurring the appreciation as well. And so just by buying appropriately, he has, $300,000 to $700,000 more dollars saved, made, added to his net worth, however you want to say it, in 10 years, and he can retire 10 or 20 years early. And those are the kind of stories that I really want to have my name on them. I tell everyone, if it's a bad deal, if you want a house, if you came to me and said, I want to put an offer in on this house, 600 grand, right at asking, I'll do it. You want that house, that's great. But if I can stop someone from making a bad deal and not make any money off of it and save them, I'd much rather do that, because that's going to come back around. And with how fast life goes, in 5 years, it'll come back around. They'll use me again, or I'll get some form of good karma for it. But yeah, switched from just trying to make as much money as I could to just how much money can I make for my clients? And that just snowballs into, well, I saved this guy 40 grand. I did this for this guy, and now he doesn't have to pay a mortgage in the worst rate environment we've seen in years. And so that's kind of been the mission recently.
Like, just through our conversations, the stories you just shared and the other stories we heard from you before, the being a great broker or realtor, in real estate, I believe you got to be knowledgeable about what you're doing. And that even beyond just real estate, right? You need to understand economics, understand it's a good time to buy even, right? Sometimes interest rate, right? Understand what's Fed's doing and the local economy, right? Where Colorado's doing. And of course, the local market. And also, like you said, you just mentioned about the taxation, right? How to save tax, right? Tax benefit stuff. Also, I mean, after hearing your story and, my experience buying a house here, it's just a great realtor just kind of is so resourceful, right? To connect, banking, right? To find the local, like the best lender around, just knows so much about local stuff. And what else, would you say to make a great realtor or broker?
Yeah, so that's a tough one because it really depends on the strategy you're going for. There's a different range of brokers that you would want to use. And once a broker gets smart enough to do their own flips or, decides to pivot to that, which happens fairly often, you might lose that service. But so for your standard family, it's really tough because we have multiple subsects of realtors, good, bad, whatever, the top 10%, top 20%. You always want to go with someone that's in that range, of course. But we have this gigantic influx of bad realtors because the barrier to entry is so low. And I obviously take much offense to that because I got a degree in the subject and I did my time for 4 years in college, maybe 5. But it's one of those things where it's going to cause a family rift. And my sister did it for me as my first deal. I'm like very thankful for that. But using someone, and I had a background in real estate, it's a bit different. And I had a mentor that put me through the whole thing. But getting people to use you for the first couple of years is very tough. And so if you're using someone who's not doing tons of transactions, then it's hard to say. And like my transaction count isn't high in my opinion by any means, but I study the subject in and out every day. And I have mentors and I have people that I rely on and a team now that is just phenomenal with helping me with random stuff that have been, in the game of buying and selling for 15, 20, 30 years. And so for a realtor these days, if you're just buying a general residential home, it's I would just interview 3 to 5. People don't do this enough. This is very odd. A lot of folks don't like confrontation. They don't like telling people no. But at the end of the day, if I was going to be selling or buying the biggest asset purchase monetary figure of my life, it's ridiculous to not interview multiple folks. And so I would say if you're someone looking for a good realtor, reach out to me and use one of my partner agents because I already have them vetted. It's crazy how many folks, well, I just went with a neighbor. Well, this guy's kept in touch. And that's another great indicator. Like follow-up is key in the real estate realm. I send all of my clients coupons, magazines, Facebook ads, all of this stuff to keep myself top of mind, remind them, hey, I'm a realtor. Because people, I think it's 80% go with the first person they choose. And the hyper analytical folks, while they can be tougher on the get-go, are generally better clients because they, as long as they trust you, they know, well, like, yeah, this guy said the plumbing's bad because the plumbing's bad. And maybe he can get me a deal on it. Or maybe we just have to think about it as the property's worth 20 grand less. But it's figuring out, what you want for flippers. If you're a defined great flipper and you need to use a realtor, which some do, some don't, that's a whole different ball game. I would going into a new market and you want to flip a place, I would absolutely just reach out to the biggest renovator flipper you can find. Who do you use or who do you recommend? I probably won't use them after 4 or 5 times if I like this market, but for that person, I mean, if it doesn't close, they don't get paid, but they might say like, look, man, this needs 40 grand of a sewer line. It's going to kill your top line. And they don't even get paid, but at least they're willing to tell you that you're going to owe them for the rest of your life. And so it just depends on what you're looking for. Yeah, I would interview the living crap out of every local agent you could, and you'll understand after a while who's good and who's not. Yeah,
I know you're a good one.
maybe.
Yeah, I mean, just you're knowledgeable and you're resourceful, and beyond that, you actually care for people, with authenticity. Right? So yeah, I appreciate that. Just I was very, I benefited a lot from having a conversation with you. Just having pick of the brain. Say when I was looking to some investments locally.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, I bought a triplex in Lawrence, Kansas, by University of Kansas, college town. So the guy I work with, he was saying that he would say no to most of the houses I was looking at.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to make a deal happen, trying to close a deal. I really appreciate that because if he just trying to get closing deals, that could be, I mean, that's a terrible deal to me. And eventually I'm not gonna work with him anymore because he didn't provide the right information or thoughtful information. Yeah. So what's your so do you work with mostly clients who looking for residential or some investors?
Yeah. So my main source of income was your standard, friend or acquaintance of acquaintance buying a place until, about 6 months ish ago. And that I'd say 30 to 40% investors from that point on, or before that point. And now switch brokerages, we manage about 600 doors in Colorado Springs, and we just have a huge flow of people wanting to buy and sell that are mainly investors through us. And most of it's setting expectations with 20% down and the product that we recommend, which is single family below median, price. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. For a buy and hold, it's tough. It's 25, 30% down, and then you're cash flowing mildly. And that's a tough one with the current rates. Will rates go down? Will prices go down? I'm not too sure, but I would say it's 50-50 now. I like helping people that are, first-time homebuyers, especially because I was a first-time homebuyer once. It was extremely scary. I have new clients that are first-time homebuyers, and they were super scared about the whole process. If you're, set financially, if you're having a good time, if you're doing okay, it's not anywhere near as scary. And then you realize how much you've been missing out on from not owning a home and from having to rent. If you buy appropriately, buy a piece of junk, your life's not the most fun. But yeah, I'd say 50-50. It all really depends.
I think especially for investors looking for, properties, there could be from, local investors or even investors out of state, especially the investors out of state. They don't know so much even about the Colorado market, Colorado Springs. So they really need to heavily rely on your expertise and your understanding of the local market. I think you yourself, as you are an investor yourself. So I think you go through, being through the whole process, running numbers, understanding economics, understanding the real estate industry. So I think that's super helpful for your clients, especially those who are investors.
Yeah, it's no, I do a lot of analysis, a lot of underwriting for folks, and it's appreciation market currently. We're not cash flowing very well, but my latest thoughts on it are we're trying to buy some in Omaha as well, where we went to the university.
Yeah.
And that's more of a cash flow market. It's turning into one that's not, unfortunately. It's the prices are higher. But if I were an investor hedging with those two, so we have our appreciation market in Colorado where rents generally don't make much money unless you're doing rent by the room, which that's a whole nother subject we could dive into. But it's one of those things where if I could secure some absolutely gorgeous properties here in nice neighborhoods, just like the one we saw, Boulder's fantastic. If I can at least make it so the property pays for itself, a 30-year hold, that's probably going to make me a couple more million than say the same kind of property in Omaha, just because people want to live here. And I had a guy from Texas call me about a triplex I have listed the other day. He says, look, the rents are low. This is what I'd have to do with 20% down. And I was with my wife in the car, and I try to not be aggressive or rude in any situation. And I try to just ask questions that just make people think. But I said, look, man, yeah, the rent's low, but this is in Cheyenne Canyon. This is not, you cannot build a new triplex in this space. If you gutted it and redid it, you'd get 800,000 or 900,000. If you were able to secure an Airbnb permit, you would absolutely crush it down there. Very good cash flow, even if you paid 900,000 for the place. The reason you can't make it cash flow right now is that's why it's the value's built into it. It was under rented by someone who, didn't care about the money. They paid probably $20 for the place in 1980. And I just asked him, what's your criteria, man? Where are you buying? And he says, oh, well, my portfolio's in Oklahoma and some in New Mexico. And I go, right. And do you want to live there? Do you want to be in Oklahoma for the rest of your life? Or what does that look like? And he goes, no, I can't remember where he lives. He might be in California or Texas or something. But there's a very stark difference, especially with rentals. People go and buy these cash flowing rentals, pay $100,000. Oh, I get $1,200 a month for rent. This is amazing. I'm cash flowing $600 or whatever that turns out to be. And then one sewer line ruins your cash flow for the next 2 years. And it's this weird ratio of, do you want an appreciation? Do you want a nice tax write-off? Do you want XYZ? Do you want to get lucky, like on the outskirts of Omaha, buy a really cheap place, rent it out for cheap, and then hope the appreciation really upticks there? Do you want to go to Alabama and any problem with the home, your cash flow is killed for a year? It's just a very odd time right now, especially, interest rates tripled 2022 from the lowest point. And so we're seeing, which I appreciate, we needed that to create a healthy market. It's not, people got really mad about the 7% thing or interest rates, and that needs to happen. It's still historically low. The prices need to come down or, stay where they're at, or wages need to come up, something of that nature. But we cannot have a hyperinflated market as we saw when we were all able to buy houses for 2%. Now, am I very upset that I didn't buy more? Yeah, 100%. But it's the new normal. We've had to wait it out for 2-3 years of stagnation, but there's about to be some very, very good deals. And we're still low on inventory. They pretty much stopped building because no one's going to invest in them. And well, I guess the small builders, big builders are still building, but bolder builders are building. But it's an interesting time. And I think attacking anything right now, we have the most power we've had as buyers for the last 6 years, maybe 7, where we're at in Colorado. If we decide to hyperinflate the dollar again, which the US tends to love to do every once in a while, you might be able to get that, $1 million premium on like Denver downtown, Washington Park. I did an open house a couple months ago and they paid 1.8 for it in 2018, sold it for 2.6, and they just had to live there, and that's it. And that's not normal. I don't think you should be making 800 grand for just 100 grand for every year you live. Holding costs, of course, are expensive on a place like that. But it's one of those things. So I want to buy here. I want to buy in Omaha. I want to buy probably a couple other spots, but that's for the future.
Speaking of building in Boulder, I'm likely to to work with to partner with my friend here.
Yeah.
We are in the process of kind of finalizing a land. His wife is a realtor, and like trying to build 14, 16 units of townhomes. Yeah, so he somehow found this land that's been there for several years in Lafayette, in Boulder County. Yeah, so that's kind of like a new thing for me to try to partner and to invest in the building, small projects. I also would like to partner with some, Denver area local friends, many years experience, kind of acquire or build, some large buildings, each building maybe 300, 500 units for apartments. There's commercial locations on the first floor, they build in kind of like in downtown area, Denver.
Mixed use.
Yeah, so their model is to kind of work with an organization called Apartment Life. They kind of send a couple that live in there, kind of build a community, organizing a lot of community events. It's kind of getting to know everybody, like it's kind of like building a community, really, because each apartment is like 300, 500 units, 500. That's like 500 families. The problem is that there's like isolation, among the apartments, like families. They don't know each other, even living there for a year or two already. You don't know their neighbor. Yeah, and their model is pretty cool. I'm trying to think about how I can work with them. Raise capital with them, for them, or invest in my own money, stuff like that. Yeah. There's a still great, shortage on real estate supplies,
right,
in the nationwide. So that's has been there and it's been like that for many years.
Yeah.
And U.S. population is growing. The kind of like a birth rate is still high compared to other developing countries. So what do you see right now? Especially just right now, just a new presidency in the place for 1 to 2 months. How does that affect the real estate world, or how does that even affect what you are doing so far?
Yeah. So that's a fun project. By the way, I have 2 clients that are multifamily architects. Talk about that later. You can cut this part out. But so I read. I wish I could tell you where it was from, but I read a really, I didn't think anything of it at the time. It was in one of my books, and I've read about 12, one per month, generally 10 pages a day. And one blurb out of, I can't remember, but it was, regardless of supply, there is a certain point when people will stop paying, and we hit that. And it's very odd because you would think people need housing, they'll pay whatever. But if that wage gap is too high, people will find out other ways to become more uncomfortable, but be able to afford what they need. And so we've seen the rise of course, rent by the room, co-living. We've seen more roommates wherever we're at. And you can go to New York City and it's a perfect case study where, you get a closet and it's $2,000, but you have a closet and it's not the same size apartment they were building in, say, the fees, you're going to pay $2,000 for the closet because that's what you can afford, not $16,000 a month for the apartment that's 15 times the size of said closet. And so we're at a point now where rents have regressed and they've stagnated a bit. Obviously, a lot of my thesis on economics is based on ups and downs of markets, and a healthy market cannot act the way that our economy did for however long. And so with that, it depends. In a strong economy, they're always going to push up the rents and see how far they can push it, but we pushed it too far. So from that standpoint, like, I'm working on a new project right now that it's trying to find investors, and we know that it's a fantastic investment in 3 years. But since there was 10,000 new units that are coming online, finished by September, a lot of these large apartment complexes in Colorado Springs did a very large loss to lease, which means first month's rent's free. You get a free Amazon TV or something if you rent this, and you get the first month free, no security deposit. They're filling these to try to weather the storm of potential storm. It's not even really there yet, but of rent prices for apartments dropping heavily. But the funny part is they can no longer really get investors to want to buy there, because when folks saw, oh, well, rents are going up 20% a year over year in Colorado Springs, wow, we need to invest there. That says to me, like, yeah, you might get lucky with another year of 20%. You might have gotten that, but if I'm hearing about it, I'm already too late. And so it's a really weird one where we have more than 10,000 people that move to Colorado Springs in a year, or maybe it's 11,000, but that supply is going to be absorbed. And now no one can get funding. No one's really building more projects, and I'm saying no one, but there's obviously still people doing stuff, but I don't know what percentage versus 2 years ago it was, but it's a very tough, interesting topic, because we're not going to be able to fully tell, and I'm not going to be able to see if I'm correct or not for 5 years. And with that, should we be building as much as we can, taking a huge, a loss leader, like milk at the grocery store for 2 years, and then we're able to, have these assets that we secured at a lower price, and they're much higher in price in 2 years because they pull in $3,000 a month in rent, as opposed to the $2,100 that we thought that they were going to bring in. And, does that work with interest rates or not? It's all up to this spreadsheet, but it's a very, very interesting time, because we don't know. I just told my clients, and my other client cut off his girlfriend, which was awesome to see. It was, didn't cut her off, but she said, well, prices are going to go up right here. Like, this is a good buy. And I go, I cannot promise you that. Generally, for this area between now and September, yes, it gets hot. It's people want to live in Boulder, West Denver, XYZ. I would never want to put you in a property. Say, if this was fully renovated already, I'd probably say no, because it'd be, $900,000. But since I'm able to get you a property, and your boyfriend is able to integrate the sweat equity that we need to bridge the gap from the $700,000 property to the valuation fully renovated of $900,000, I can tell you, you're not going to lose on this one. And I would absolutely recommend to do this. But to tell you our price is going to skyrocket again or do anything weird, the general public remembers when it was just doubling, not doubling, but, houses were going up $100,000 a year every year for that 2-3 year period. And people are scared it's going to do that again. But it's, there's a certain point when people just can't afford it. Our wages don't support where we're at. So stagnation, interest rates go down, or list prices go down. It's a tough one to say.
I mean, nationwide, it's mainly ideally, if the Fed is not affected by the government or the executive branch, the Fed really deciding on the interest rates. So that affects the whole market in the nation, the whole nation level. I mean, also, it's like we said, it's not like a national market. It's each state, each county or cities is so different. So investing into real estate in the States, really need to understand the local market.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a huge place. Like, I'm scared to invest where I'm from in Omaha, because I've seen too much stuff that I would have bought when I lived there 5 years ago that's now worth $100,000 more. And what that says to me is, it's a clean city. I love it. It's a great place. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better spot to raise a family and a low cost of living.
Warren Buffett is there too.
Yeah.
So get to catch up, right?
Yeah. I gotta catch up with him again. Yeah. Anyway,
like Brandon Turner always says, like, you buy in the good times and bad times, just keep buying, right? And then eventually you have a portfolio of 10,000 units. So what's your plan on building your portfolio?
So everything has pros and cons, and nothing's as good as you think it is. I like the fund structure. I like the syndication structures, and I recently have been studying those very heavily. I have a couple projects that I can't really talk about yet because they are in very low percentage of happening, and they're also in the infancy of them. But just from what I know, and you have a lot of folks that reposition into different strategies, and they could totally be right. So if I dropped everything and went into self-storage right now, I'd probably do okay. But I know more about multifamily than anything else. I know more about investments than anything else. And I'm still always learning. I don't know anything compared to, 5, 10, 20 guys in my phone that they could run me under the rug with knowledge, and I'll definitely consult them when I decide to implement. For now, I wanted to do 30 units by 30, which is a funny number to say, and I easily could have done it if I stayed in Nebraska.
What are you now?
28.
Okay.
So I have 481 days left until I turn 30. And I wanted to get over a net worth of $1 million by that point. Will it happen? Will it not? Depends on how lucky I get, or if I keep losing these $100,000 deals, which I have every single year. There's like one or two of them. Haven't made one yet. One day. But it's one of those things where I know the most about multifamily. I'm right now focusing on making as much money as I can. And hopefully the market is conducive to that for me to provide the capital for whatever project I do. But I think it's going to consist of, I don't know how many partners or just myself if I make that much money, but I like the multifamily sphere. I like commercial multifamily a lot. I think it's extremely powerful, but also a single family portfolio is better for appreciation. And so regardless of whatever I decide to push into, it'll most likely be a fund of some sort, acquiring however many units. I'm more concerned with, I have numbers, but it's more of, I've worked my ass off for 10 years now. I've always wanted to be successful at something. I think I'm becoming mildly successful in the real estate sphere, maybe, but what do I do past that? And I don't think I'll ever think I made it by any means, but I'd say, probably building multifamily or building. I really, really love making things pretty, renovating, flipping. It could be anything. But for now, multifamily fund of some sort, like the one I used to work at. It's extremely powerful. You give your investors back whatever, 10% or 12% or 8%, and they have a secured return, and you get to use their money to make, normally value add or whatever strategy you try to implement. But that's also extremely scary because it dropped 20% on average in the commercial sphere. So if I would have implemented that 2 years ago, I would have lost my investors a couple $1 million, most likely, or I would have never bought anything and then had to pay a couple $100,000 in the lawyer fees and, whatever, holding their money for X amount of time and then not doing anything with it. So it's figuring itself out. But for now, the more that I split focus on not just helping my clients, the better. And in 2 months, I still always have something that's in the works, but in 2 months from now, it could be completely different.
Well, at least I want you back by your 30th birthday.
Yeah. Well, no, I was I was talking to my wife about it or someone. I'll be at 999 just on the day of my birthday. Exactly. All assets. No, I'd love to blow way past that, but it's at a certain point, once you get over X amount of net worth, it doesn't really matter. And I don't want to lose the fight, so to speak, or the hunger, but I want the freedom of mind to be able to be at that point and do whatever project I want. Because that's your best form of creativity, is when you're not superbly focused on bringing this home per year or finishing this next project. I want the silence of a couple $1 million to really figure out the actual gigantic project that I want to do, which probably multifamily.
Yeah. I mean, you just mentioned about 30 units. I was thinking, for a lot of real estate people, a lot of them actually just want to invest into real estate to retire. And one day, I built a portfolio to maybe 30 units. If they fully own those 30 units without any loans on it, so they could totally retire. And then freedom, that brings the financial freedom. Freedom really brings you the option to keep working on it or not, right? It's like the option you can choose to work on things you like to work on and not to work on things you don't like to work on. Yeah. I need to stop this one.
Sure.
Yeah. So you also mentioned about, the kind of build a portfolio. Most people think about, say, over 10,000 units, right? So like Brandon Turner said, he's not analyzing units, a project that's less than 500 units, because that does not make sense, because they need to deploy so much money, right? So much capital. So you also mentioned about, building a portfolio of single families, right?
Yeah.
For some small investors, that could be, that's an option. That's a possibility too, to bring financial freedom. Right. If you just need 30 houses, that could bring you financial freedom in Colorado Springs as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, I wasn't looking at that model so much. Just 2 years ago, I started thinking about investing into real estate. I realized that one of my old roommates in California back then, his dad is the CEO of a company. So his dad partnered with the founder of Public Storage, the Orange, like public storage.
Oh, wow.
Company. So I think they had a $1 billion initial investment. They start buying houses, only single families, the whole country. My roommate was graduating and didn't know what to do, and then she just working for his dad's company. I said, "What do you do?" He's just like, "I'll fly to Phoenix, fly to Atlanta, every week to bid on houses." So their model is they only buy single families. They eventually, I think their portfolio, even for the first 2 years, they built about 50,000-60,000 units, single families.
Jeez.
They have a lot in Colorado as well. So that as long as you find a model that works for you. Typically, if I had $1 billion, I wouldn't probably want to build a single family portfolio. But obviously, apparently, it works for them. And then they went public like 12 years ago. So yeah, I just keep thinking what can make sense. Also, I'm interested in, industrial and real estate as well.
Yeah.
Policy, or his mind is that it's bring manufacturing back to the States. America really needs like good foundation in manufacturing. Bring those manufacturing companies back from Asia, from China, from even from Europe. Like a natural gas over there is like 3 times more expensive. The taxation, the tax benefit is not as great as the United States, especially some new policy from Trump. So that would be tons of that would be over like a decade of trend for those manufacturing coming back to the States. I think the blue collar jobs are needed here to build a stronger middle class group. So I think as long as I see that trend happening, I'm pretty confident about pretty comfortable about investing to those industrial warehouses for manufacturing or for storage.
Oh, yeah.
So that's something I'm interested as well.
If I knew more about it at all, and it's something I should start studying, I'm sure, because it's, easier, less tenant headache. You're, triple net lease, whatever you decide to do with the area. Yeah. You can't lose sometimes, but yeah, it's one of those, pivoting. I definitely think I'll hedge with some of those eventually, but that's, a whole different realm. I feel like a first time home buyer when I talk to someone about the commercial sphere for warehouses, self-storage, XYZ, and it's very simplistic underwriting. You have an input and an output, revenue, expenses, whatever you want to say, but that's just a tough one. And you need to play a big game you need to play big to get into that game. And so if you don't have the capital behind what you want to do, because I'm not there yet, I'm sure I could raise the same amount of capital as I'm doing for, some apartments or whatever, and probably kill it, probably make a better return, or not. It's the unknown of the area. And so I think that's really smart. I think, you can't lose with single families in good areas. I don't think you can lose. It's mainly the area for me. There's certain houses in Colorado Springs that are $400,000 or $500,000 dilapidated, but they are on the top of the ridge that is before Garden of the Gods and Pikes Peak. And you get out on the back deck and you go, this is going to be worth more than Boulder one day, maybe, if our city picks up the flag. And in some other realm, it might never be, who knows, but this is $1 million view. If I could hold this place and even lose money on it for 30 years, I can assuredly make a ton when I go to sell it, whenever that happens. So investment vehicles right now, they're just tough, especially like I could never tell you with the oil and gas thing. Why would you ever invest in real estate? I don't know anything about that sector. And so I'm, but from what I know, from what you've said, and investing in real estate is for, and from everyone I've ever heard, it's for after you make the money. And that stinks to hear. And it used to not be that way. You could buy a house, renovate it, rent, repeat, or you could flip houses easier. But we're in a time frame now where we're back to it's used as a holding mechanism. and it's fantastic for people that already have money, but you're going to have to grind very hard to get to that position to buy all of those houses. It's not like they're going to appreciate $100,000 a year again for a long time, I hope, or else we have a lot of other problems with our economy. I'd love for that to happen just so, I can make some money, but it's an interesting time. And so, I don't know what the best investment vehicle is right now. Oil and gas, your investments.
Oil and gas is drains 30% and it returns 10x in 10 years.
Right.
So my investment are really great. But also, at the same time, I invest into real estate. I love real estate because that's as stable, and oil and gas are stable too. It's just so needed in this world. It's a little bit diversification.
Oh yeah, always get diversified.
Right. So the reason why we saying that house is gonna if you hold it for long term, it's gonna appreciate. So that's based on a confidence about this country, about this country's economy is still flourishing, right? The economy is doing what people are expecting. We are still having growing population from immigrants, from the higher birth rate among our people. So as long as that's happening, as long as the United States don't fail itself in economy, so real estate's pretty safe play. So that's why I still see a lot of opportunities in this country. Even building wealth slowly through real estate, it's very possible for a lot of people. So one thing, I recognize the issue or the problem is, so once you buy your first house, right, you're naturally enjoying this appreciation from day one, right? Typically. And then like you were saying, like house hacking or whatever, you rented out part of your duplex, that's generating cash flow. So once you have the first unit, it's not so hard to get your second unit and then 10 units, right? So for a lot of Americans, I think a lot of people are kind of stuck in that, like when they buy and they're the first home buyer, right? So they don't have that down payment even. So I would like to ask you what your experience on that and your recommendations on that, because once they have even 3% down payment, and then they could buy their first home, and then they could start generating accumulating wealth for that generation and even more generations. So what's your take on that?
Can you extend that timeline for 7 years, or is it gonna make you house poor? Is kind of the question. So I always come back to the 7-year average cycle. It could be 10, could be 15, could be 2. 3% down has its times, and now is generally not the time, but it's always normally a good idea to buy. And so depending on your strategy, depends on what you can do with the house. If you are forced to rent out every single room and you barely can make the mortgage payment from that, and you're banking on the rates coming down, then that's a bad idea. You do that, and then you get another job where you make another $100,000 a year or something, and you're able to recast the mortgage so that you have a technical higher down payment, or however you'd like to look at it. Maybe that's it. But it's all about it's just always going back to the spreadsheet. It's whatever you can do, and it's always more beneficial to buy. But it just depends on how far out you can push your time horizon. And I've lost 10, 20, 50 grand this year so far of talking to folks that want to buy, the renters, and they have a very low down payment. And I say, look, as much as I'd like to, sell you a place, make my commission, get on with my life. You said you're going to move in 2 or 3 years. Like, how about we look at the rent versus paying for a home? And then maybe you do move in 3 years and we just manage the property for you. Is that even going to work? Let's plug that in after 3 years, and it's just one of those things that's very tough. It depends on your specific situation, but for how overpriced some markets are and how expensive it is, either, you can find good deals anywhere. It just depends on how much time you want to put into it. But finding a good deal is extremely important. Or maybe you just have a great salary and it doesn't matter that you're paying $1,000 more a month, or you're paying $4,000 a month for a mortgage because you guys have, 2 kids and $200,000 of income. Then why would it matter? You can buy at the house on a theoretical bottom, or maybe it even goes down another 10% or something. But you got a good place to live, you're paying off the mortgage from that point on. Maybe it depreciates another 5% over the next year, whatever. Or you bought at the correct time, it's going to go up. Maybe you make 5%, or you lock it in at 7%, hoping it's going to go down, but then interest rates go up to 10% for however long, and you have the lowest mortgage rate you could have got at any specific time. And so there's always a way to get creative with it.
Right.
In theory, there's some properties, that you can't, but there's normally, I just tell all my clients, look, the world ends, everything's going to change in 2 years. You never know where you're going to be. Let's try to at least get you a place that you can have multiple exits, multiple strategies, so that you are hedged against if something goes wrong. And so if a client buys a duplex, let's check on the short-term rental permits. Let's see if you can pull in X amount if you move away, or let's see if you can live in the duplex if things go really wrong or whatever. But it's all about just that secondary creativity with it and selling it off at the end of your hold period. There's a lot of different factors that go into it. 3% down or 0% down can totally work, but I see a lot of folks forcing it right now to work. And will that pay off in a year? Probably, I'm always wrong, but that's not really a risk that I'd want to take necessarily. If I'm spending all of my income, and I know people that are so smart that do it, that this isn't, directed at them because they're going to make 500 grand a year in the next couple of years because they're so smart. So that's a good idea. But like, there's a lot of stretching going on right now for people because it's a status symbol to own a home. And like, I might go rent, eventually having all my stuff taken care of, not having to fix the furnace when a flame sensor goes out. Or people idealize being a landlord. And I would love to send them the video of going into my tenant's crawl space, which they live next to me in the duplex. And I asked them to flush their toilet because their flange was leaking or whatever. And I just had toilet water like hit me in the face, like that's real estate. That's owning single families and managing them yourself. Like you earn that money one way or the other.
Right.
And so it's just deal dependent, which stinks to say, because 3 years ago I could say buy anything you want, you're probably fine, but just know the well is going to run dry one day. And it did, and it stagnated for 3 years. And so lots of short sales coming back, lots of foreclosures coming back, and that's when we go buy stuff.
Right. I definitely don't want people to overstretch, right? But what I'm talking about mainly is kind of like a mindset of like kind of what's it called? They always feel that they don't have enough. That I met some people in this country and even locally that they've been working for 40 years, retirement age, but they've been always renting, and they kind of have enough like income to have planned, to have for some down payment and buy their first house even 20 years ago. But it's been 20 years of renting. I feel like they have missed a lot of opportunity. Investing that opportunity. To generating more wealth, to have the wealth, accumulated there. Instead of renting for 40 years. Right. So I just felt, for some of my American friends that they could have had a better strategy. So they always say, well, the house pricing is going up so much every year. I don't have enough money. I'm not saying like for people to overstretch, but I feel like I'm in generally a more of like a risk taker. I like to stretch a little bit and to make something happen. So that's how I have, invested in the past so far. So just some thoughts on that.
And I'm thinking about this from like a hyper knowledgeable, you or my position. And for the average person, there's two things with what you just said. Financial literacy in the country is far too low. People like Dan Cheeks is an amazing guy. He is actively working, produces books to help teenagers, kids in high school he just petitioned to like have financial literacy, I guess, in his district or something like that. That's one of the things that needs to happen. But that also comes back to the comfort level of it. And every time I'm uncomfortable, I feel like a loser, doing the worst in my life that I have, or I made a bad decision, you always come out the other side having broken through some frame that you had a mental block from. And most of them, the Americans are not willing to, that are, in a position of renting for 40 years. They either don't know or they're not willing to become uncomfortable enough to do that. And there's also responsibilities. You have 4 kids. You're not going to go out of your way and figure out all this stuff. You don't have the time. And that's just your situation. And so for it, I think it just starts with figuring out financial literacy, understanding that the dollar is going to inflate every single year, understanding that locking in a mortgage for 30 years with one of the cheapest ways to secure a loan for 30-year government-backed product, and then understanding like, it might stretch for a year or two, but that dollar is going to inflate. And in 5 years from now, $3,000 for a mortgage that's going to be a steal.
Right.
Or, and that's just one of those tough things. So people need to get uncomfortable, but in order to get uncomfortable, you're going to do a ton of analysis and maybe you just don't have the time for it. And so financial literacy just needs to come up as a whole.
Yeah.
Then, but the 40-year rental thing, that always hurts because you paid someone's house off and you get nothing from it.
Yeah, I remember the term now. It's like the mindset of poverty mindset versus the abundance.
Yeah.
So one last question.
Yeah.
So what's your goal or legacy you would like to leave? For or just a goal or a vision for you and your family.
Yeah. So I
real estate or others.
The only thing I've ever wanted to be in my life was good at business. And people tell you to have a defined goal, but I'm more in the mindset of having a defined hunger, so to speak, because your goal can always change. Telling someone I want 30 units by 30, that's already changed. I don't want that. I want 3,000 by 30, or I want 3. I don't want 30 that I manage myself and have to get tenant toilet water on my face all the time. So it's just one of those things where I think for where I want to crush the game of business. And that's always been my goal. And I've studied it so long now, and all I do is study real estate and business. And I see all of these inconsistencies in how things are run, service, the level of service from certain businesses. I think for where I'm at, I want X amount of units. I want this. I want financial stability. But I think the actual fun that I get from my entire life is helping other people make their lives easier with real estate and by having cash flow from appropriate assets. And if I could do that on a repeatable scale over and over again, which it becomes more prominent each year and depending on market cycles and stuff. But I think just helping people understand how money works, especially going back to the financial literacy thing, it's one of those where is the system fundamentally broken in this aspect of me saying this? Even people need to learn how to use it, but it's not going to get any less intricate. And so there's really no fix for taking down the entire government or anything. Can't do that. It's one of those where you have to play by the rules. Unfortunately, you were born here, you live here, whatever. Yes, we can do some legislation to fix it, whatever. But at the end of the day, I think if I could find a way to repeatedly help people scale their business, like Bigger Pockets and Brandon Turner and all of that, I think that'd be the most fun. And then just, a nice house, some nice cars. I think I'll be happy when I'm at that point, but I'll probably also be doing something crazy. Like, I don't know, betting on blueberry future commodities. It's all dependent, but I just want to crush business. And that's what I've done for a couple years now. And it feels good, but I don't think there's ever an end goal.
Personal success and helping other people succeed.
Right? Yeah, that's the end goal, but it's not a definable one, which people want.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, no, I just, I want to help people make $1 million or whatever you want from me from that. And have I already done that? Probably at this point, but like to go through every transaction and be like, okay, well, I saved them 13,000 on the appraisal value here and add it all up. So it's tough to say a goal, but I just want to keep going.
I always heard from, investor friends or mentors saying that don't make kind of have a bigger vision and don't just think about 500 units or 1,000 units. Think bigger. And I was always being encouraged by doing that. Like I said, I personally would like to have a goal, but also I want to enjoy the process. I want to kind of live out 100% of my potential. If I have the talents, I have that potential, I want to work hard and to make 100% potential out to benefit the world, benefit my own family,
Yeah, no, that's smart. And it's always, I don't know, having one set goal is great if you can get it done in that time frame, but might have to pivot. So
yeah, cool, man. So great to have you over and have this amazing conversation.
Yeah, no, thanks, Justin. That was tons of fun, man. I'm glad we finally got it in, and no, appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely have you back someday. Yeah,
right. We'll see. I'll be homeless by 30 just because I said it here.
Exact 3,000 units.
99.
Yes.
Cool, man. No, yeah,
Cool.
thanks.
Thank you.